Hey, welcome back to the BOSH tutorial series. My name is Chris and today we'll be looking at how you install a BOSH director to vSphere. But before we do that, I want to repeat a few of the concepts from the previous video, especially the three concepts stem cell, release and manifest. Because when you're going to deploy a BOSH director, you're actually deploying it with BOSH itself. So yes, BOSH is deploying BOSH. So even for deploying BOSH, it's very important to understand these concepts. So we're going to need a few things when we deploy BOSH. It's a stem cell, which is the OS image we talked about last time. It's a release, namely the BOSH release, and a manifest, which specifies how we're going to deploy the release on the stem cell to create the BOSH director itself. So let's take a look at what we're actually deploying when we deploy BOSH itself. So first of all, we need a cloud or a software-defined data center like vSphere or Amazon AWS. We need some kind of IaaS. Infrastructure just needs to be there. In this tutorial, we'll be assuming you have a vSphere environment, maybe you have a home lab with vSphere, maybe your employer has vSphere. We'll be deploying this on my vSphere server in my home lab. On top of that, we'll deploy a BOSH director. It's just a VM. It's just one. You don't need like 12 VMs and 5 load balancers to run BOSH. You just need one single VM. That VM runs a database and all the BOSH software. And then this VM will make a connection to the SDDC, to the IaaS, using what we call a CPI, a Cloud Provider Interface. This Cloud Provider Interface is the magic that makes BOSH able to talk to different clouds. So it doesn't really matter if you deploy it to vSphere or to AWS. It's kind of the same. It's just the Cloud Provider Interface that's different. So once the BOSH director is deployed, the BOSH director can then deploy other VMs on top of that infrastructure. And each VM is based on a stem cell you upload to the BOSH director first. And so it contains a BOSH agent, which BOSH uses to communicate with the virtual machine, to push software, run the scripts, etc., etc. So, whenever you get started on BOSH, it's a good idea to visit bosh.io. That's the site that contains all the software and all the documentation, etc. There's even a special installation tab on the website, which I'm showing right here. And it tells you the first thing to do is go and grab the CLI for your operating system. So go ahead and do that. Just pick whichever one you need. I'm running Linux, so I use this one. Now just make sure you get the latest version. Be absolutely sure not to use version 1 because that won't work. So at least version 2, but preferably just version 3 and higher. So you can check that by running bosh-version and it will show you the version of the BOSH CLI you're running. So now earlier I told you we need a stem cell and we need a release and we need a manifest in order to deploy the BOSH director itself. Well, luckily, the guys over at BOSH invented something to help us out here. They created a GitHub repository called BOSH Deployment. Just plug it in Google and it'll be your first hit. And what this contains is like a basic manifest of a BOSH deployment. A BOSH deployment of BOSH itself, that is. And a lot of what we call ops files. So these are like modifier files on top of the YAML. So the main YAML is bosh.yaml, and I can show it right here. It's not that big, but don't bother reading it. Don't really need to know all the stuff that's going on here. We'll take a look at it later. What you do need to do is clone this repository to your own machine. So I'll click here, clone, go back to my prompt, and I'll git clone. Wow, forgot how to type. Now we'll clone it into BOSH-deployment. So let's take a look over there. And this is what's in there. So now let's switch back to the website, bosh.io. And let's check out the installation manual for VMware vSphere, which is all the way at the bottom over here. Let's click that and it will tell us what we need to do to actually get it installed. And as you can see, they also clone the BOSH deployment GitHub repo, make a folder, and then run a create env command. So let's go ahead and do this. Actually, let me go up one folder, create a new directory called BOSH tutorial, and we move the BOSH deployment folder in BOSH tutorial. So if we now go to BOSH tutorial, we should have a folder called BOSH deployment. All right. So what we need to do now is run BOSH create env. As you can see in the manual, it's BOSH create env, BOSH deployment / bosh.yaml. And then there's a whole lot of variables, and I'll go through all of them. For now, I'll just copy this. So copy the whole thing, and I will create a deploy script in this folder. I'll just use sh for now. Use vi for now, I mean. So let's copy all this text in there, and let's go through it. So let's start at the first line. So what we're going to do is run the BOSH command, the BOSH CLI, and it will give it the command create env. So that means create environment, right? So we're going to create a new BOSH environment. And as input, we'll use bosh.yaml in the BOSH deployment folder. So we just cloned that folder from the Git. So we use the standard bosh.yaml from the Git repo. Then we specify a -- state, and this is going to produce a very important file. If you later on want to change your BOSH deployment, you'll need the state.json. So make sure you keep this file safe somewhere. We also need to store our variables. So this manifest actually specifies quite a few variables like passwords, usernames, certificates, and all that kind of credentials. So we need to store it, and later we need it to retrieve the admin password to look into BOSH. And then we have this -o, which means ops file, and then we point the BOSH CLI to this ops file, cpi.yaml. So what this does is that this YAML file will basically change the basic bosh.yaml file. So it's like a modifier. So it's a very nice way of altering pre-existing deployment manifests without having to edit them manually. And then in these manifests, so the combination of this one and this ops file, there are lots of variables we need to fill in before we can actually do the deployment. We do that with -v, and then the variable name is, and then the value of the variable. So we need to actually provide these. So the values from the website are just examples. So I'll create new values. So this will be the name for the BOSH director. So you can just pick whatever name you want. I'll call it tutorial director. Then the internal CIDR, which is the internal network you'll be deploying to. So this is my internal network. Of course, you need to pick your own internal network. Then the internal gateway. And that's my internal gateway. And we need to choose an IP address for the BOSH directory itself. So in my case, 192.168.192. I'll pick 14. Then the name of the network. And this is the name of the port group inside your vSphere environment that you want to use for the BOSH directory to connect to. And in my case, it's just VM network. So the example works in my case. In your case, probably different. So you should pick the right network name right here. Then the vCenter DC is the vCenter data center you want to deploy to. So let me just quickly log on to my vCenter server here. Okay, so let me show you my vCenter environment here. We've got one vCenter with a data center called, well, data center, and a cluster called cluster. Makes things easy, right? So this is the information we need to fill out in the variables for the deployment. So let's go back to that. You see vCenter DC, which is, in my case, it's just data center. Then we need to pick a data store as well. So let's go back to vCenter and pick a data store with enough free space available. Data stores, and let's see. We have SSD02. Yeah, seems good to me. SSD02, let's use that one. So we just fill in SSD02, and that's the data store where the BOSH directory will be deployed to. Then the vCenter IP, so that's the IP address of the actual vCenter server. You could also use the DNS name. Won't work in my case, so I'm using the IP address. Then the vCenter user, which is, it's never root actually, it's administrator at vSphere.local in my case. If you're in a production environment, you'll probably want to use a different username, not the actual administrator. So you probably want to create another user with close to administrator permissions. And then here I'll fill in my super secret password. Yes, that's in plain text, so be careful with this. We also need to specify which folders we want to use. So these are folders inside vCenter. So let me show you. In vCenter we have like these folders. So that's what we want to specify here. So let me call that tutorial. Let's use dash templates. And then the same for the VM, so we can put the VMs in a different folder. Tutorial VMs, no. That's VI, playing tricks on me. Then we want to store the vCenter disks, same story. Let's use tutorial disks. And then the cluster we want to deploy to, and as I showed you, that's just called cluster. So that's easy. And that's about it. That's all we need to deploy a BOSH director actually. Now I hear thinking, what about the stem cell? What about deployment manifest? What about the release? Well, if you take a look at the BOSH YAML file in the BOSH deployment repo, you'll see that the release is already specified. So you see the release BOSH, and you also see a URL. So whenever this URL is included and this hash to check if you were actually downloading the right thing. Whenever this is included in a deployment manifest, then BOSH will just go ahead and download the release itself. So that's really easy. So we don't need to download the release and upload the release to a BOSH director because, well, there's no BOSH director available yet. And same for the stem cell. It will just download the stem cell for us, upload it to vSphere, and then deploy the BOSH director from that stem cell. So let's make the little script we created executable. Deploy.sh and then run it. It will start validating. You'll see it downloads the release, validates the release, and now it's downloading the stem cell. And this will take quite a while, so I'll speed this up a little bit and tell you how long it took afterwards. Cheers. Ooh, hot. Okay, so right now it's actually deploying the BOSH virtual machine. So let's take a look at vSphere, see what's going on there. So, as you can see down here in the jobs, it powered on the virtual machine. So, it seems to work. we can see it created a folder in the data center. It cloned the virtual machine after it first uploaded it. So you see this virtual machine with these weird names. This one's called SC, which is for stem cell. So you can see which machine is what just by the prefix of it. So there's SC for stem cell and there's VM for obviously virtual machine. So it uploaded stuff, powered the machine on, reconfigured some things on the virtual machine. And as you can see, it attached a disk. So BOSH Director doesn't only need the system disk, which comes with the stem cell, it only wants a data disk for databases and other kinds of data, persistent data. This is also the disk you really want to keep. This is the disk that contains your actual configuration of the BOSH Director, of all the deployments that are done by the BOSH Director. So be careful and just make sure you keep that disk. If you throw the disk away, your BOSH Director is gone basically. If you still have the persistent disk and you manage to somehow kill your BOSH Director, you can always deploy a new one and then attach the old persistent disk and everything will be back up and running. So what's happening now is that my machine is compiling packages that will be going to be installed on the actual BOSH Director. So it looks like it's compiling it twice, right? So it's compiling package here, and then here it's compiling packages again. So what it is doing is that it's compiling packages, just the minimum amount of packages it needs to compile to make connection to my vSphere environment from the CLI. So as you can see, it compiles the vSphere CPI, so the cloud provider interface, and that's the actual part that makes the connection between BOSH and vSphere. But in order to compile the vSphere CPI itself, it also needs Ruby because the vSphere CPI is written in Ruby. And then it also needs an ISO tool to essentially to create ISO files, which are then attached to the virtual machines it deployed. So it can load configuration from the ISO file. So that's the minimum the CLI needs to connect to the vCenter instance and then deploy stuff on top of that. And once that's done, once the first virtual machine is running, it will go ahead and compile packages which are going to be installed on top of the virtual machine. And that's what we're waiting for now. So we're almost done at the last step, I believe. So it compiled a bunch of packages and then it went ahead and installed the packages. So that's the updating instance you see here. So it updates, well, the BOSH instance and then it waits for it to be online. And now it's finished. So we're done. We actually have a running BOSH Director. So now the next step is connecting to it and deploying other software with this BOSH Director. So to do that, let's go back to the bosh.io website, because it will tell us how we connect the BOSH CLI to the installed BOSH Director instance. So let's scroll down a little bit and it will tell us connect to the director. So this is the first command we need to run, BOSH alias env, etc, etc. I'll copy it for now and then I'll explain what it does. So let's start with it, clear screen, and do this. So we'll run the BOSH CLI and we'll run the command alias env. So previously we run the command create env, which created the environment. Now we're going to create an alias for this environment. This alias only exists on the machine I'm currently logged into. It even only exists for my user. So it's stored in your home directory. So I'm going to create the alias called tutorial and then E for environment, and we're connecting to the environment .14, that's the IP address we gave in the deploy script, right? And then we need to provide a CA cert because the BOSH CLI won't be able to connect without a proper CA certificate. And we'll be getting the CA certificate from the creds.yaml we created with the previous step. So What we do here is we use BOSH int. So we run this command. So it's between these parentheses. So this means the output of this command will be fed into, like with this arrow, will be fed into the command before this. So we run BOSH int, and BOSH int is short for BOSH interpolate. So this will do, it interpolates this YAML file, and in the YAML file it will look for a path, and the path is director_ssl/ca. So let's go ahead and run that, and that actually worked. So what happened? So let's take a look at the creds.yaml, and let's remember this director_ssl/ca. So if we look at the director creds.yaml, you'll see a whole bunch of variables, and all these variables are automatically generated by the BOSH CLI in this case. So we didn't need to specify any of this, didn't need to generate our own certificates, we didn't need to generate our own passwords or anything. It's all automatically generated. And then it's stored in this YAML file. And in the YAML file you'll see different variable names, also the CA certificates and everything. So if we look for we go back, director SSL it's called. Let's look for director SSL. There we go. That's the director SSL, and we'll see the CA certificate underneath that. So the path is director SSL/CA. So that will give us the value of this variable. So everything in here. So that's what we fed into the CA cert. So now we created an alias for this environment. We call the alias tutorial. If we run BOSH envs, will give us all the environments I have on this machine, and one of them is the tutorial I just created. So we can now log into this alias. And so let's switch back to the website and see what it tells us to do. So it tells us to export a BOSH client, which is basically just a username and a client secret. Instead of doing that, we can also just log in with a username and password. So let's try and do that instead. So let's use BOSH and then -e for environment, and we called our environment tutorial, and then tell it we want to log in. And we'll ask us for a username, and username is admin, and now we need a password. Where do we get the password? Yeah, you know it, right? Think about it for a minute. Correct, creds.yaml. And that's why on the website they do it like this. So they run this BOSH interpolate command to retrieve the admin password from the creds.yaml. But instead of doing this, you can also just copy paste it from the YAML file. So let's Ctrl+C out of here. View the creds.yaml file, and then there's the admin password, admin_password. So we'll just copy that and log on again. Username is admin, and we'll paste the password here. Succeeded. We're in. So what we can do now is see whatever is in the BOSH directory, which should be nothing, but let's check anyway. So -e tutorial, and then let's check for stem cells. Are there any stem cells? No, there are no stem cells. Are there any releases then maybe? Maybe somebody put something on there. No, no releases. So what the BOSH create env gives us is a completely empty BOSH director. There's no stem cell, not even the one that was uploaded during the deployment of the BOSH director itself. That stem cell is on the vSphere environment, but it's not known to this BOSH director. So it did upload the stem cell, but if we want to deploy new software onto this BOSH director, we just need to upload our own stem cell. And that's actually exactly what we'll do in the next video. So for now, thanks for watching. If you like this kind of content, click subscribe and like. If you have any questions, just leave a comment or find me on Twitter. Thanks for watching.